All right, so today you have exercise 120 to work on, and really exercise 120 is a lot about how do you create an AutoCAD drawing that can actually go up on the wall and look good, present well, has decent line weights such that you could read what is wall, what is furniture, etc., and kind of general organization to make these files look good. That's what it's really about. This was originally intended to be what we were going to cover last class, but you guys seem to use the time wisely, and you've all done a great job working on your floor plans and getting them up to speed. So we're kind of shifting back a day in time, which is perfectly fine. Today we're going to concentrate on making this floor plan look good. On Wednesday we'll take this floor plan and we'll draw the elevations of this building. Probably that hasn't been a primary concern in designing your building. You've been thinking about the floor plan and how things come together. We'll cover how do you make this into an elevation in great detail as we go forward. But today we're going to concentrate on really improving the readability of this particular plan. So I have a plan that I'm going to work on as my kind of example plan. And right now I have the entire plan on one layer. So if we were to look at my layers here, I have a layer called Plan, I have a layer called Zero, and I have a layer called Topography. And before I get too much into customizing things, I want to kind of introduce the concept of layers to you in the world of AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, it's kind of like in Illustrator or Photoshop or any of the rest of the programs that we've already used, in that it has layers. It allows us to put objects on layers. They work a little bit different than the Adobe products in that the order of the layers really doesn't matter in terms of how they're drawn. It's just an organizational strategy. So generally speaking, we're going to put things that go together on the same layer. And for the scope of this class, I really don't care what you choose to name your layers, but it's important for you to know that if you went to work for an architecture firm, they would have a set of layer standards that you would need to follow. And so, for example, they would have a certain way of naming what a wall layer is or what a door layer is. Typically those names are A-door or A-wall or A-window or something along those lines. That's usually what the standard convention is, meaning this is an architectural drawing and it's the walls. If you were a structural engineer and you were doing structural drawings, you would do S-whatever, and that would differentiate you from the architect who's doing the architectural drawings. And so we follow that standard convention as a way of kind of organizing our files and letting us share files with each other and knowing who's doing what on what layer. And so for the scope of this class, it really doesn't matter whether you call it a wall or you call it wall, etc. But we're going to set up and move our objects to be on specific layers, and then we'll start to modify the properties of those layers. So to get started, I have the home ribbon set up here. I noticed this morning that a lot of the computers had defaulted into the 3D view, the 3D basics view. So if you don't see what I see when you click on home, make sure that you have drafting and annotation showing. If this drafting and annotation button is not there, click on the little triangle at the end of whatever is there and check the box for workspace. And when you have that checked, you'll see drafting and annotation. You may see 3D basics instead. We want to make sure we're in drafting and annotation because that is the view that I'm going to be working in, and you'll be able to follow along with that. So I have drafting and annotation set as my workspace, and I'm in the home ribbon. And as I come across here, we get to a section that's called layers. And this is really my access to my layers. It's the shortcut way to get into layers and to work with them. We're going to click on the large button that says Layer Properties on it. And when that happens, we'll get a window that will pop up that's our Layer Properties Manager. And AutoCAD does windows slightly different than other programs in that they can be minimized into kind of a little sideways drawer, and then they can kind of roll out when you move over them. Some of you have seen that there's this design feed rollout that shows up on one side of the page. This is just AutoCAD's way of trying to include a bunch of information on the page without cluttering it too much. You could dock this into the side and have it sitting over here on the side. But for right now, we'll leave it as this little floating window. And I want to walk through what these layers are and kind of what the various properties are. So we have a layer called 0, and in the world of AutoCAD there is always a layer 0. You can't delete layer 0. It just always exists. It's the default layer. And so we're just going to leave that there. Below that I have a layer called Plan, which is what all my plan is on, and I also have a layer called Topography, which is where my topo lines exist. You may or may not have those set up in the same order. You may just have 0 and Topography. You may have drawn everything on the Topography. We're going to sort that out right now. As we move over, let's look at the Plan layer here for a second. You see that the next little icon is a light bulb, and that turns the layer on or off. Okay? We also have something with a little sun on it that's called freezing and thawing a layer. And on the surface, they do essentially exactly the same thing. So if I were to, for example, let me make my current layer layer 0 here. If I were to turn off the layer, my floor plan goes away. If I were to turn it on and then turn off the freeze the layer, the same thing happens. Okay? So the logical question would be, why would I use one over the other? And the truth is, for what you're drawing, it really makes no difference. You can use either one. But I'll try to explain it to the best of my abilities as to the difference. The on or off light bulb is a temporary change of state. So you might temporarily turn something off, and if you were to regenerate the file, if you were to save it and then open it again, that would come back on. Okay, so it's just a temporary turn off of the layer. The freeze or thaw is a permanent state until you do the opposite. So it's going to stay frozen no matter what you do until you unfreeze it or thaw it. Okay? The other thing that can happen is if you have a really large file with a lot of lines, complicated building, and AutoCAD's running a little sluggish, if you just turn off a layer, it won't actually purge that layer's information from the system's memory or the CPU cycles. So if you freeze the layer, it'll take it out of the system memory and give you a little bit more to work with. So if you had a really complicated drawing and you wanted to kind of speed things up a little bit, if you were to freeze some layers, you'd be able to release that memory from the system. I really honestly think it's kind of a holdover to the days when this was hard on a computer. The truth is that a line drawing really isn't very hard on a computer anymore. We've got plenty of power to deal with them, but it is there, and it is something, and there is a difference. If I were to have you start to learn something, I would turn on and off layers by freezing and thawing them. If you get in that habit, you're always going to be better off in the long run. Okay? As we move to the next column, we see a little padlock that can lock and unlock depending on if I were to click it. So for example, if I click on Plan and I lock it, that means that the layer is currently locked, and while I can still select the layers or the objects on the layer, I can't do anything to them. So I couldn't, for example, delete them. Right? It would say erase 27 found, 27 were on a locked layer. So there's nothing that I can do to them. The good news is that I can still snap to them. If I had a polyline and I wanted to draw a line from, say, here to here, I can still always snap to them, even though they're locked. The other thing that AutoCAD does is when I lock a layer, it kind of grays out the layer. So you see it was bright white, and when I lock it, it kind of turns to a light gray as a way of telling us that it is locked right now. So I'm going to leave it unlocked. Let me zoom out a little bit here. And we'll continue looking across. So after the little lock icon, I have something called color. And the color is the color of the lines on a particular layer. The only weird thing is that white lines in model space, the things that we see that are white, will turn black when we go to print them. So they'll automatically reverse. All the other colors remain exactly the same. So if you turned a line red, it's going to be red when you print it. If you turn a line dark gray, it's going to be dark gray when you print it. So a dark gray line here on a black background might not show up as well as it's going to show up on a white backdrop. So it's a little bit confusing, but it's, again, to help our eye strain because we're going to sit at the computer and draw for so long. So that's the color. Next to it is the line type, and this changes the line type for the whole layer. And so, for example, here, if I wanted to change the plan layer to have a different line type, I would click on line type, and it would bring up the select line type dialog box. And so within here, you see that I have a continuous line loaded, but I have no other choices. So in this case, I would need to load some more choices, and I can do that by clicking on the load icon here. And I can scroll down, and I can pick any one of a number of preset lines that are available to me. One of the ones that I really like to use personally is Hidden To. For whatever reason, it looks nice in most of my drawings. So that's one that I tend to use. If you wanted a center line, you could obviously come up here and choose one of the center lines, like that. And once you've clicked on it, you're going to say OK, and it's then going to load that line into your line type list, such that you could then choose to have the layer have all center lines, for example. And that would turn to all center lines. I'm going to change it back to continuous, which is the default, so that I don't have any dashed lines or anything. The one other thing that I will point out about line types is line types are meant for when you actually create layouts in AutoCAD. So the scaling is such that you really aren't going to see the dashed line initially. So you might turn a line into being a hidden line and expect to see it as a hidden line, but you won't until you go to print it later on. So it's a weird kind of quirk in the system. So as we move forward here, we also have something called transparency. Oh, excuse me, I skipped a column. The next column is called line weight. And this is where we're going to specify the thickness of a particular line. So we can make a line thicker. And if you notice that on the back of your little handout today, there is a set of sample line weights and colors for you to reference. These are not necessarily the right or the wrong answers. It just happens to be something that I think works pretty well. So for example, if I were doing the walls themselves, I would do it at 0.40 millimeters, and the color would be black. Okay? That seems to look good for me. Now, one of the things that you'll also find is that when you go to plot it or when you go to print it, the lines are going to turn out slightly different depending on what plotter or printer you're using. These came off of a copy machine, so they're a little bit different than if they came off of a printer. Even sending them to a copy machine versus sending them to a laser printer, they still might be a little different. So it's always worth doing a test print. Does this look good on whatever your final printer or plotter is going to be? Okay, so I can change the line weight of a whole layer here. Next is something called transparency. I have to be honest, I have never changed this in whatever 20 years of working in AutoCAD. But it is there if you wanted to change the transparency for some reason. Beyond that is something called plot style color. This really is not something that we'll cover in this class, but I want to point out that this is something that a lot of firms use, and that is that certain colors will be defined as certain line weights. So you might draw all your walls in green, and then those green lines will become, when you plot, a specific thickness. It's a hold back to the old days where you used to have a plotter that wasn't like a giant inkjet printer. It was a plotter that actually had a separate pen, and that pen would get picked up and it would draw that particular line with that pen, and then they would put that pen down and it would pick up a different pen and it would draw it. So you had these different pen assignments based on particular colors, and it would use that pen. So it's kind of an old school way of doing it, but some firms still use that, so it's worth noting that is certainly an option. Beyond that, we have should the layer print or not, or should it plot or not. If I didn't want that particular layer to print, I would click on it and it would get a little red X next to it saying it's not going to print anymore. Okay? And beyond that, this has to do with whether the layer is going to be on in a new viewport or not. That's something we'll cover a little bit later on in the class. So for now, I need to create some layers to organize my file. So like I said, everything is currently on the plan layer, but I'm going to try to organize that in a little bit better fashion here. So up here at the top, there's it looks like a stack of papers with an orange star next to it. I'm going to click on that to create a new layer. And when I create that new layer, I can just type in whatever the name is that I want it to be. And so in an office, this would be an A wall. But for you guys, you could just call it wall. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to continue, and we'll do a door and another one for window, if I can type. And we'll do another one for fixtures. And furniture. Okay. Finishes. Now, of course, you could have many, many more than just this. If you had a multi-story building, you'd have first floor, second floor, those kinds of things. But for right now, this is going to cover the bulk of what I'm doing. So at this point, I'll go ahead and close the Layer Properties Manager. And now I want to move some of my objects onto various layers. And so what I'll do is I'll start by selecting some objects. And so let's say that I want to start moving some of these objects to the wall layer. I need to go through and I need to select these objects first. All right, so I'll select these. And remember, which direction we select matters. So if I select from the left to the right, everything that's contained within my square is going to be selected. If I select from the right to the left, things that my cursor touches will be selected. So we'll go through, and it takes a little bit of time to go through and select all of these. It would certainly help if I had joined these together ahead of time, but I didn't. So continue along here. Okay, so once I have the walls selected, and obviously I have more to select, and I'll do that as well, all I have to do is come up to this little layers part of the ribbon and click on the drop-down menu and change the drop-down menu to say A wall. And now those are now on the A wall layer. And so if I were to click, if nothing was selected and I were to click on one and I looked up at the layers, you can see that it's on layer A wall. Now, if I were to keep selecting, and let's keep going here, and I happen to go back and select one of the lines that I had previously put on the wall layer, you'll see that the selection goes away. There's nothing saying A wall anymore. It's just blank. That means that multiple layers have been selected. So let me keep working. Remember, if you accidentally select something and you didn't want to, you can always hold down the Shift key to deselect something. You guys will just have to bear with me for a second while we get through it here. And let me take this piece right there. And then I'll select a wall again. And now all of my walls should be on the wall layer. So I could confirm that by going to my layer properties, and then I could turn off or freeze my A wall layer. So if I freeze it, and then I were to look at this, all of my walls should have gone away, which they did. So that means I actually was able to select them all. So let me go ahead and turn those back on. And now maybe I'll lock them so that I don't accidentally select them. And now I'll move on and I'll select, say, the windows. So let me zoom in here, and I'll select these windows there. And I'll select these windows here. Those are windows. These are windows. I have another set right here. Okay, so I've selected those windows. I will change to the A windows layer. So it's telling me one or more selected object is on a locked layer. I locked the walls so that I wouldn't accidentally select them. So that's just fine. And so now all of my windows are on the windows layer. Looks like I missed a few. These should go on the walls layer. Those divisions. So let me make sure that those end up on the wall layer. There we go. Those look good. I don't need that little line. Oh, it's locked, so I can't delete it. I'll come back and delete it in a little bit. And we look pretty good. So now I'll move in and I'll start selecting the doors and move all of the doors onto the doors layer. So I'll select the doors. Now these were little sliding glass doors, so I'm going to put them on the doors layer as well. And that covers my doors. So I'll go ahead and change those to be on the A door layer. And now those are on the door layer. So at this point, there's probably some extra things like these kitchen countertops and whatever. Did I put these on the window layer? Let me just check. Yeah. So I'll make sure that my windows, doors, and walls are locked. And I'll take the rest of the pieces, which is probably just that, and then these. And I will put those on the finishes layer, like that. And I think maybe these closet doors should have been on the doors layer. So let me adjust those to be on the door layer. And now they're on the door layer. Okay, so I worked my way through to select everything. Oh, I missed this door. Put that on the door layer too. Okay, so now I'll come back in and I'll unlock those layers that I had locked. And now we'll start to adjust the properties of these layers. So the first thing is that my wall layer, if we look at the back of this sheet, has a thickness to it. And so my estimate of what the appropriate thickness should be is the 0.4 millimeters. So instead of going through and selecting the individual walls and changing the line weight under the properties section, which is available right here, I could change it right there to 0.4. Instead, I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to look at my wall layer, and I'm going to change the line weight right here to be 0.4. So there it is. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And now all of my walls should look a little bit thicker. Right? If I zoom out, we can see that those are now thick, okay, which is my idea. If you don't see them as being thick on your particular drawing, it's possible that your line weights are not turned on, which I found a number of people this morning had the same problem. The line weight icon is right down here at the bottom. It looks like 3 lines stacked up with a little triangle next to it. If you don't see that, go to the 3 lines at the far right corner and make sure that line weight is checked. And this will allow you to turn on and turn off the line weight. So it's on or it's off. Now, there comes a point where we just don't see line weights. So 0.4 we're going to see. But if we do, say, 0.13 or something like that, you probably won't see it until you go to print it. So it's understandable that some of them really don't show up. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust a few more layer properties. So I'll turn back on layer properties here. And next thing is I want the doors to be adjusted. And so if I look at the doors, I said that they should be a 0.18. And so I'll go ahead and change the thickness here to 0.18. And I'll go ahead and say OK. That means all the lines that are on the door layer are now 0.18. So if we look carefully, though, I also say that the door swing might look nice if it was a little bit lighter than the doors. So if I wanted to override the layer as a whole and just change the door swings, I can select those 4 door swings and come up to the properties and change right here to 0.9 or 0.09. Okay? And that's going to override the layer properties so that now those are all at 0.9. And again, you can't really see it. If I were to adjust the line weight settings, I could adjust the display scale such that we could see it. See if we can see it there. Yeah, now you can see it a little bit better. I tend not to do this because it ends up making the drawing look like a big black object when you're working on it. But it is something that you could do if you're struggling to see that the line weights have in fact been applied. I'm going to go back to the line weight settings and set the display scale right back to the center and say OK. To me, this looks a little bit easier to read. OK, so we've assigned the line weights to the doors. Now we need to assign the line weights to the windows. So once again, I'll open up the layer properties, and I'll come to my A window layer, and I'll change the line weight of A window to be 0.00. So it's a nice thin line, and I'll go ahead and say OK. By the way, if you were going to laser cut something, the line weight needs to be 0.00. So we'll get to talking about laser cutting a little bit more down the road, and certainly those of you in 121 will end up laser cutting this semester. The important thing to remember is 0.00 is what you're after for that line weight. OK, so I've now established the basics of line weights. It's starting to look much better than it did, but I still wanted to kind of enhance this a little bit more. And so if, for example, I was drawing, say, the bathroom, I could go in and I could draw a toilet, and I could draw a bathtub, and I could draw a kitchen counter, or excuse me, a bathroom counter, vanity with a sink, and that sort of thing. But that kind of thing can take time. And the good news about AutoCAD is there is a system in place for which we can bring in drawings that other people have done and kind of plunk them into our particular drawing. And there's 2 ways to go about this. There is a sample set of drawings that are available inside of AutoCAD, but they're not the most comprehensive, and they're not really the best. So a lot of times what I will do is I will go out to the internet, and if you do a search for AutoCAD block followed by whatever you're looking for. So if I wanted kitchen, I would do AutoCAD block kitchen, and there'll be a bunch of blocks that will show up, including something from First in Architecture, which is what I'm going to use as an example today. But you can see that there's lots and lots of examples out there that you're welcome to download and use. So First in Architecture is the site that I have downloaded things from for today's lecture. Some of the stuff that they have are paid. There's a lot of things that are free. I'm not asking you to buy anything, so use the free ones. If we scroll down here a little bit, if the website decided to load, we could get previews of kind of the things that they have available. So here, for example, is a block of beds and wardrobes. Right? So I could click on this, and I can download the file right here. Now, it presents us with two choices. One is metric and one is imperial. Imperial means feet and inches, which is what we're drawing in. So I would download this in the imperial format. And so I'll do that, and it will download a zip file. When it's done downloading, I want to take the AutoCAD DWG file, and I'll right-click on it, copy, and then go to my flash drive into today's, into today's folder. And I'll then put, that was not today's folder, that's next class. Here we go. And then I would paste that into this folder. There it is. So now I can go back to my AutoCAD drawing, and what I'm going to do is up at this top ribbon, I'm not going to be in the Home section anymore. I'm going to go to the next one over, which is Insert. Now once I'm in the Insert category, I'm just going to click on the Insert button, which is the first button on the left here for Insert. And when I click on Insert, I'll get the Insert dialog box, and I'll be able to choose a particular file. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Browse button, and then I'll go find in today's folder and that's this one. I'll go ahead and click on Open, and the defaults here are fine. It's going to ask me to specify an insertion point. I want to specify on screen. The scale is set at 1, which is fine, and I'm going to also specify a rotation on the screen if I want to. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and I can choose where to put it. And so when I click over here, I'm just going to place it on the side here. I could choose to rotate it if I want. We're just going to stick it right there. And this then brings in a bunch of blocks. And so this is one of the ways that when you get free blocks, a lot of times they'll come in. And that is that they're contained within this whole big file, and there's a bunch of them. We don't need all of them. We just need one of them. So what I'm going to do is type explode, which will explode the large block that contains all the files and let me have access to the individual little blocks. Okay, so now maybe I like this particular bed right here. I'm going to go ahead and type move, or again, I could go back to the Home ribbon and click on the move tool right there. And I'm going to move this object over into one of my bedrooms. So there it is. And let me go ahead and rotate it. So I'll click on the rotate. It's going to ask me to specify a base point, which is the point around which you want to rotate. There it is. And I want it to be, in that direction. And then I want to move it again, let's say on the middle of this wall right there. Okay? So now I have this bed. Now maybe I didn't like that bed and I wanted a different bed, or I wanted one with a little side table or something. Let's say I wanted this one. We can just move this one into place. And maybe we'll stick it over here. Again, I have to rotate it, so I'll use the little rotate command so that it's in that order, and then we'll move it again. and we'll go to the center of that wall. Now maybe I wanted 2 of these, so I could copy this and create a second one. And then maybe we'll move both of these over that way. And now I have 2 beds. I don't know how you would access this closet, but you get the idea. Okay? So the point is that you can drop these into your building. Maybe I like this little closet pole thing. I could copy that as well. And we could put it inside of the actual closet here, something like that. So this is another thing that comes up, is that sometimes the blocks aren't the right size. And so in this case, this piece of closet isn't really the right size. I can use the scale command, which is available here, to scale this whole object down. And so by default, I can type in a percentage, or I can make things bigger relatively easily. But sometimes you want to make something smaller, or you know a width, for example. That's called a reference scale. So if I type R for reference, it's going to say specify a reference length. So maybe I'll say this side to this side, something like that. I want that length to be 2 feet. And that then specifies a new value for it. And I can move this over a little bit more into the closet, for example. Okay? So I've started putting things in. Now maybe I want some other objects. Right? I don't want any more of these. We can just delete them. I just press the delete key. I'll come back to insert, and then I'll click on the insert button again, and I can pick a different file to bring in. So there is also some built-in content into the world of AutoCAD, and I can get to that from the opposite end of this insert button, which is called the Design Center. And so if I click on the Design Center, it will open up a structure such that I can pick from a list of sample objects. And for whatever reason, it's really difficult to find. And so by default, it probably opens the Autodesk folder. And inside of the Autodesk folder, you probably have AutoCAD 2015 and AutoCAD 2016. If you click on AutoCAD 2016, I only have 2015. And then you click on Sample. And then you click on EN-US. Go figure why they make this so difficult. I have no idea. Then we can go into the Design Center. And here there are a bunch of sample files. So I can, for example, if I make this a little bit bigger, sorry. I can click on the kitchens. I can double click on blocks. And I can see the blocks. Maybe I can't. Click on blocks here. I can see the blocks of kitchen-like objects. So here's one that's called a refrigerator. And I can double click that refrigerator. And I can say OK. And it will then let me drop it into my building. Say right there. Now I want to change the rotation so that it's in the correct orientation. And then I'll go ahead and move it from here to there so that it's part of my kitchen. Okay? So I can do this with a stove. Right? There's a variety of objects that I can continue doing. And whether you get your source objects from a website like First in Architecture, you can also, many companies actually have CAD drawings of their particular things. So for example, if you went to the Kohler website, they have CAD drawings of toilets. And you could drop in one of those toilets if you wanted a specific designed toilet. Now, there's always some problems because a lot of times the models are in 3D, but you would still get a pretty good sense of what it looked like. So if you're looking for something specific, don't hesitate to actually search for that particular manufacturer and drop that particular drawing straight into your drawing as well. So we've now added some blocks into this to make it look a little bit better, put some furniture in, etc. The next piece that I want to show you is something called hatches. And AutoCAD has the ability to fill in any closed region with a hatch or a pattern. And so I'm going to start by filling in the walls with a solid hatch. So if I go back to the Home ribbon, in the first little section of Draw, in the bottom right corner, there's something called Hatch. You can also just type Hatch into your command line. And if I were to click on Hatch, it brings up the Hatch Creation ribbon. And what I can do is I can pick what pattern I want the object to fill with. And so right now it's set at kind of a diagonal 45-degree line. I could expand this and pick from any number of presets, and you can kind of scroll through. There are also, like let's say you were doing something that used a bunch of Bellegarde pavers. You can go to Bellegarde and you can get a hatch pattern of the particular Bellegarde paver that you were going to be using. So some companies offer hatch patterns for a particular product. So anyway, for right now I'm just going to pick on solid because I just want there to be a solid. And when I zoom in a little bit, I'm actually going to try to pick in between these little lines. And you see that it gives me a live preview if I hover over what's going to fill. And so I'm going to fill in that section of wall, and I'll continue on and I'll fill in this section of wall. And then I'll fill in this section of wall. All right, and then maybe this section of wall. That looks pretty good. Let's do that section and that section. That. And that. And there's a few other little pieces that need to be filled in. Do this, this. All right, looks pretty good. I'm just double checking. A few more little pieces here, here, and here, and right there. Okay, so I filled those particular sections in. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and hit enter. And it now fills in all of my walls as solid. So looking at it on the screen doesn't really make much difference, but let's say I went to print it. And once again, I'm going to use my JPEG again, and let me choose a window. That's not going to work. Let me try it one more time. That. Let me go to preview. And so now if you're looking at this as a floor plan when it's in its black and white, the walls really jump out at you. Okay? And sometimes it's desirable to have this kind of stark wall, black and white looking plan. And I'm sure when you've looked in books before, you've seen floor plans that look like this. This reads very well from afar, right? I would imagine those of you in the back of the room can see this and really understand this is a floor plan. Okay? That's because of the nature of this kind of a drawing. Now, if instead of having it this dark, if we wanted to tone it down a little bit, we can change the color of the hatch. So let me just go ahead and cancel that for a second. And I'm going to come in and I'll select the hatch again. Now, because I did it all as one operation, it's going to select all of the pieces of the hatch at once. So I don't have to go through and select them all. And I'm going to come up here, and we have the ability to change the color to a specific color. All right, so I can, for example, change to one of the grays. I can also go into more colors. I have a tendency to use this 251 gray a lot, but I saw this morning that 251 gray doesn't really show up on the projector, so I'm going to do the 252 gray instead. And when I click on that and say OK, you'll see that my selection turns to being gray rather than being white or black. Now, it doesn't look that great here, but if I were to go to print, and we'll use my previous plot settings and do a preview of it now, where it was really punchy before, the stark black, now it's a little bit softer. And so sometimes this is the look that you're going for. So you, as the person who's going to be presenting this, right? You don't have to present it in this class, don't worry. But if you were doing this as one of your final projects or something, you're going to be standing up there and you have to decide, do you want it to look really punchy, black and white? Do you want it to look like this, where it's toned down? Do you want it to not have any fill at all? And that's really something that's a matter of what looks right to you. Maybe this one's still a little bit strong. We could go back. We could select this again. And we could say, let's make it even lighter. Go to more colors here. Let's drop it way down to maybe color 254 or something like that. And now if I were to print it, previous plot, preview it, right, I see very little. It's just a little bit of shade. So there's a really big difference between the black and white version and this version. And it's really up to you as to how far you want to push this. But I want to show you how to do it, because that's the important part. Okay? So that's filling in those particular pieces. Now, I can choose to use the hatch command to do more than just that. I could, for example, use the hatch command to put some flooring onto various pieces of my drawing. So let's say that I wanted to put some tiles in this outdoor space here. I could again go to the hatch tool, and inside of this I could pick something like maybe one of these kind of brick patterns, something like this maybe. And when I click inside, we can see that it's now added a little brick pattern there and there. Now I'd like to fill in this particular piece here that's underneath the door swing, but if I were to do that, it would fill in all inside my building, which I didn't want to have happen. So let me just go ahead and back up for just a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer. And so I'll come up to Layers, and I'm going to create a brand new layer. And I'm going to call this one No Print, for lack of a better name, because I don't want it to print. And I'll come over here and I'll turn off so that it won't print. And then for some reason, personally, I always turn non-printing layers green. I don't know why. It makes no difference what color you pick it. But for me, it's associated. Anything that's green I know isn't going to print. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a little line that goes right across here at the threshold. And I have to make sure that that ends up on the no print layer. There it is. And so now I could go ahead and I could go back to Hatch. And I could pick inside of this. I need to go back and pick my, my brick pattern again. And I could pick inside of this, and inside of this. And now I have that pattern on the ground outside. I'll go ahead and press Enter to finish. But I would like to adjust the thickness here. So I'm going to do a 0.00 at a color of 251. So I'm going to come over here, go to More Colors, pick the 251 color. There we go. And I want my line weight, and I may have to go into Properties to change that. Yeah, I'm going to have to. Let me go to Home, and then over here to Properties, and I want my line weight to be 0.00. So it's a nice thin line. And so there it is. Now, these little bricks might be a little small. Maybe I want them to be a little bit bigger. If I select the hatch and I come over here to this scale, right now it's at 1.0. If I went to maybe 1.5, oops, it helps if I type 1.5, those might get a little bit bigger. And maybe my desire would be for them to be a little bit bigger. Maybe I'd want them to be a little bit smaller. I'm thinking of these about 1 foot by 24 inches, something like that. So larger stones. Now maybe I want to do wood flooring on the inside. So let me go back to Hatch. And this time I'm going to pick something different. And I'll come back up here and I'm going to pick the long diagonals here. And so if I were to pick inside and click, if I were to zoom in, at some point we'd see there's the diagonals. But the scale is really not set right. So let me go ahead and just finish so that I select everything. Do that. And I am having a problem with this bed. We'll come back to deal with that in a second. Now let me select the hatch, and I'm going to adjust the hatch scale. Maybe I'll do 10. It's still not quite there. Maybe I'll do 20. And so this is a bit of a guessing. Not quite 30. Okay, that's starting to look pretty reasonable. Now I don't want my flooring to be diagonal, so I'm going to adjust the angle of the flooring to be at maybe 45. And when I do that, now all of my flooring is going vertical, which is what I wanted. Okay? And so I'll go ahead and hit Enter to finish. And now I have that. It looks like I had a little bit of trouble with this bed. Not the hatch goes right through the bed. So let me try to exclude that from the hatch. So I'm going to select the hatch again. I'm going to come over here to the Remove Objects. And we'll see if I can remove this from the hatch. It doesn't always work. Unfortunately, sometimes these blocks won't let us do it. Yeah, looks like it's not going to let us do it from that. So I may have to come in and I may have to do some modifications to this block before it's going to let me do the pattern and cut it out correctly. So I'd also go back and adjust a few things like the color, right? And maybe the line weight. So I'll select it, go back to Home, and change the line weight to 0.00, something like that. All right. And so now I have the flooring in there as well. If I were to go to print, we could see what this would look like. Go back to previous plot and then preview, and there it is. So I have a little bit of flooring, I have a little bit of fill in the walls, and I have a tile pattern that's outside, etc. You guys get the idea. So I can use hatches for these. Now, just because I used hatches for the walls and the floors doesn't mean that you have to do that. This is an optional thing. It's just something that I would present to you as an idea of a way of making this look more like an actual floor plan. Okay? So we've covered layers, we've covered blocks, we've covered hatches, and we've covered line weights, which are the 4 big things that I want you to work on today. So the ultimate goal is to have something that looks rather similar to this in terms of we have furniture that we brought in as blocks, we have some hatches, we have some fills, we have line weights that have been established so that we have a good, nice looking plan. Okay? Save this as a JPEG and post it today, but then also save your work because next class we've got a big day because we're going to do the elevations, all 4 elevations of this building. And so this takes a little bit more conceptualization to kind of think through. So as homework, I'm not going to actually make you do anything, but think about this project and what would it look like if it were a 3D object, right? If it were an actual building. So in my case, I've thought through a lot about what this is going to show up as. And so if I were to open, I did a little 3D model so that you could see it. But if I were to open it up, give it a second, right? I've thought through what I think these building elevations would look like. So I've kind of done a quick little 3D view of this so that I can kind of see, okay, this is roughly what I want my house to look like, in its site context, etc. Okay, so you mentally think through, oh, this is what I want. We will ultimately build your house in SketchUp, and so I'm going to train you how to bring it into SketchUp, and we'll do this, and you will probably learn an awful lot about what your building elevations look like once you try to build it in SketchUp. But for right now, we're going to ultimately try to do the drawings first, and I'll show you how to fold them out and then work with those drawings. Okay? So I just want you to kind of have thought in the back of your mind what you think it's going to look like. But that's not required for today. Think instead about making a really nice quality floor plan. Any questions? No? All right.